right, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Neil Redding. I am co-editor with Tony Parisi here of Near Future of Retail, a publication on Medium we started middle of last year. And you'll see, if you haven't met or heard from us before, how passionate we are about kind of the technology and the evolution in retail. And also, we're very aware of like the current kind of like a real apocalypse, you might call it now. But I think the transformation is where we really want to focus and where we see a whole lot of opportunity. I also have a consultancy, Redding Futures, that I run, which is focused on helping brands and businesses engage powerfully with the near future. There's a lot of information on readyfutures.com, and would love to hear from you if that sounds like something relevant for you or your brand or business. Tony?
Yeah, and I'm Tony Parisi, head of AR and VR ad innovation at Unity. Unity is the platform, as most of you know in the audience, that's used to create the majority of the world's AR and VR content, half of all new mobile games. And I focus on our advertising strategies around immersive content. That is any kind of brand content for advertisers made with our Unity engine, or advertising that's delivered through our ad network that reaches about 2 billion people every month worldwide and 3/4 of the US population. And I look at retail as the flip side of advertising. So much of what is sold is a physical product. And so the idea that immersive retail can connect up to immersive advertising is really exciting to me. And I'm happy to be on this journey with Neil. As Neil mentioned, we have a blog site that we co-edit. This is the first in a video series that's going to be happening along with the blog. And initially that is framed around what's going on in the new era. Neil mentioned it, with everything going on with coronavirus, with people sheltering at home. We're going to explore those themes through the lens of these changes in our lives, accelerating the transformations that we're talking about today with retail in 3D.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's just jump right in. So since we're talking about retail and commerce here, we just want to take a moment to reflect on the fact that we've had full-on e-commerce for over 20 years. Many of you, I think, have been around that long. This is a recent photo of Amazon, but really it hasn't changed much, right? It's fundamentally the same kind of experience in 2 dimensions on the web and even on mobile apps or native apps as we grew up with in a glossy paper catalog. And what we're really seeing, in the past 10 years, we've been able to capture these kinds of 2D images and share them and modify them. And then after that video, on our phones, anytime we want. And that all of that is really preparing for the next huge shift, the next major media type, we like to call it, which is moving into 3D.
Yeah, and so imagine all of these kind of catalogs we were just looking at, and then we've all grown up with for the last 20 years, being interactive. I can take any product and explore it, a 3D representation of it. I can try it out in my space. And all of these things are happening around us. The industry is transforming and moving in this direction. And we don't think it's going to take 20 years at this point. We think it's the next 3 to 5. And we're going to dive into what that means across the board for this industry today. And by the way, this is an encore presentation of something that Neil and I did. What was it, about 3 weeks ago now, Neil, at World Retail Innovation Week?
PSFK conference, yeah. So some of you may have seen that. I mean, we designed this to actually we've got an hour here instead of 25 minutes. So plenty of time to have Q&A at the end once we get through everything. So we're going to end with some future casting as well. So hopefully many of you will stay for that conversation. We look forward to hearing what's interesting to you guys.
So with that, let's get into it, Neil. What are we really talking about here?
So what we're really talking about, so we wanted to start this, as we have in the past, with just a kind of mind meld, a sense of like a shared understanding of what we mean by a digital virtual object or a digital 3D object. Now, this is from Shopify's mobile app. They have a company that sells strollers. And a stroller is something where it really is valuable when you're thinking about what stroller you want to have a sense of its physicality, right? So how does it look in the room? Whether it's my living room in this example, or how it fits on the sidewalk, or maybe in the back of my car, the hatchback. this is a physical thing, and where it fits and how it fits, how it shows up physically in our worlds and our physical environments is really important to know when we're purchasing something. And so being able to create digital models, digital twins of these objects, and then make them available to shoppers, to customers, people considering purchasing this kind of object is really, really valuable. So this is what we're talking about when we say a digital 3D object or a digital virtual object.
And you note, even from this one example, it's not just cool that I can take that thing and spin it around, but there was some utility we saw in there already. It's like, how does this thing look in my driveway? How does it look folded up in the back of my hatchback? This is going to be the key to every one of the use cases we talk about today.
Right. Awesome. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and so that was an example of something Shopify has enabled. But what we want to make clear from the get-go with this giant eye chart wall of logos is that this is a movement across the industry. What you're seeing here on this slide is the logos of companies involved in an industry-wide standardization effort. We're not going to talk about this in too much detail today. If you have questions during the Q&A, I can drill into this more. But these are members of a working group inside a standards organization called Kronos. These are the people that do 3D graphic standards for phones and other kinds of hardware, as well as content creation standards. And this group has gotten together under that umbrella to focus on creating solutions where the content can be developed once and shared among multiple consumer endpoints across different aspects of a content creation pipeline, exactly the way 2D digital imagery is done today in a ubiquitous fashion. It took a while for JPEG and PNG and all these other imaging standards to coalesce and become usable by an entire industry. The same thing is happening for 3D content right now, and it has all the industry's biggest players involved in doing it across, the brands and manufacturers who make the stuff, to the retailers who deliver it in their online stores or in their in-store displays to show you, to all the big platforms that will reach you through advertising or social means, to the tool creators who make the production software to make it happen. So this is a big deal, and it's not just a set of cool demos that show the future. The future is being built as we speak with all these companies involved.
Right. So, and building on that, we're going to cover ways that you, if you have physical products in your world, in your business, in your brand, or if you're related to or work with people that do, there's going to be a way to quickly create digital objects from them. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. So we want to talk about a few use cases now, right? So one of them is taking virtual objects and trying them on, right? So we're all familiar with how this works on our faces, right? We've seen and enjoyed more and more, actually, I think, in quarantine, face filters of all kinds. And so mobile devices are really, really good at mapping the face and being able to add content, add physical objects, even, dimensionalize, not just sort of digital layers of 2D onto our faces. And this can be really, really valuable for makeup or for glasses. And this is from Warby Parker's mobile app, which when you're using an iPhone 10 or beyond is really, really amazing in terms of how realistic it is. So this is me using the app. Those are not physical glasses. Those are Warby Parker virtual glasses on my face. And you may not be able to see the detail through Zoom here, but there is shadowing, there's reflectivity. It really, really looks realistic when you're looking at it through the app. It's fantastic. So this use case is basically solved. If you don't believe me, you can try it out of the Warby Parker app yourself. So that's just one great example. You may be wondering, well, great, we can do that for our faces, but what about other things we try on, like apparel? This is very early stages. There's a lot of difficult problems to solve in terms of physical modeling of how fabric flows on people's bodies and things like this. But to make it realistic, again, it's going to take a little while. But there are still usable early examples and applications and platforms that will allow for, as this example is showing, the customer to select different apparel items, put together an ensemble, and then in augmented reality, see a three-dimensional mannequin or model modeling that ensemble, that set of products. And they're just calling it visualize the look here. So, so you can see
now, as Neil said,
reality experience.
It's kind of early days. I mean, we're seeing this is pretty decent mannequin view we're seeing, but you know, when you think about actually doing clothing try-ons for real people, and I want to see how this looks on me, we're at a place where there's still a lot of research going on. There are hard technical problems to solve to do this with real-time graphics engines today, where we can represent the fabric, say, of a shirt I'm wearing with all the folds. A lot of the research that's driving this is actually coming from, say, doing filmmaking, real-time engines in Hollywood, where it's like I'm doing cloth simulation, I'm doing hair, I'm doing fur. These kind of technologies are going to make their way into retail use cases over the next few years, and then you compound them with being able to try it on, you know, a multivariate set of bodies, you know, large people, small people, different heights, and all the movement that it goes along with that when I'm doing a try on. So we're at a very early stage here, but the clothing side, you know, the apparel side of the retail industry is also getting really interested in using these technologies to reach consumers and to, you know, understand what kind of things people are going to want to buy virtually. So it is coming. It's not quite as far along as some of these hard goods like the strollers and the accessories like glasses that we've been showing you so far.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, great. So, and then here's a slightly different approach. There's a company called Obsess, which I think is a great example of doing this, but there's this feeling, right? I mean, those of us that love shopping are really, really missing that visceral, full sensory experience of a beautifully designed, merchandised showroom, kind of being in that space, you know, the lighting, even the aromas, just the physicality of it. And so Obsess is taking a different approach, creating what they're calling virtual showrooms, and, you know, in 3D that can be navigated on a mobile device, allowing you to see, and I'm gonna stop the video for a second, so you can kind of see and pan around this, again, design merchandise showroom, and then tap on merchandise, be able to see the standard product detail you'd expect about that, and then move through the space. And so obviously it's not the same as being in the physical space, but there's something about it that is satisfying in something like the way of being in physical space is. So we think this is a really interesting direction. I think this is one of the ways that immersive retail is showing up in a useful, powerful way.
Yeah, Neil just talked about this in terms of, you know, being able to do this remotely, which is key right now. But assume we get to a place where we come back and we unshelter and we do get to go into retail stores again. I think we all hope for that someday. And the ones that survive, we will all be back there in droves as soon as we can, I'm sure. Then this kind of technology could also be used to extend the in-store experience so that you can have a handful of mannequins and a handful of samples and clothing on premise, but you can have an infinite catalog you're showing people on site with the assist of a salesperson. So those will be great days as well, and super excited about that. Neil, did you want to?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, you know, having worked in retail, you know, for retail brands a number of years, I mean, there's this endless aisle, which is kind of this endless, a holy grail, right? I mean, that's a term that retailers often use, which is the standard problem of limited floor space in a store, but in almost every case, right, the retailer will have a vastly larger inventory of available products that are somewhere. And the real problem of it is, from the retailer's perspective, of course, and frankly from the customer's perspective too, is that the sad situation where a customer shows up, browses, and doesn't see a product on that floor and then leaves without it being fulfilled, and leaves without the retailer making that sale, when the retailer actually has a product that would be satisfying that the customer would purchase, right? So we've been thinking about this for many years, actually. That's a whole other, you know, kind of conversation we could go deep into, but how can this technology, not just kind of digital 3D visual technology, but other kinds of technology, personalization, AI, machine learning, et cetera, which we'll get into a little bit, but how can all these things come together to actually fulfill on someone being in a space and being really close, but not quite there to finding the product that they want, right? So, and then there's the other dimension of it.
Get back to that. Go ahead, Neil. Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, and the other dimension, which I thought you were going to talk about here, Tony, is that once you have a 3D model, right, of the space of your showroom that you've designed and merchandised out, which is a standard practice these days, right, then it translates fairly straightforwardly into a virtual experience, right, which can be deployed certainly on VR, but I think also on AR on people's mobile devices too. So you can kind of kill multiple birds with one stone, so to speak, if you're a merchandiser or a store designer, which is really exciting.
100%. Yeah, and if we get a chance, we'll come back to some of these when we get into the future segment. Really exciting area.
Yep, great.
Yeah, so moving on.
Moving on to advertising, right, and
yes,
search.
Yeah. I'll speak to this. So, there's a whole other side to this, which is how consumers discover this content, right? We've been showing you use cases of try out apps, all that kind of stuff. But how do people actually find this? They're probably, unless it's something like Amazon's app or Walmart's app, and they know they need to get it to do some shopping, there's a whole area where they're not going to discover experiences like this unless they show up as advertising content. And so what we're exploring at Unity, if you look at the imagery on the bottom right of your screen, you'll see this. This is a Unity ad campaign, which was for advertising. It's for CPG. It was for Miller Lite, for a beverage brand. This is an interactive experience in AR that was advertising Miller Lite for a St. Patrick's Day campaign. The point of this is this was not an app you had to download. It showed up as a Unity ad in the places where people are already playing a game. They get to the end of a game level, and then they're invited to have a brand experience. I mean, typically our ads will advertise other game publishers' games, and it's a user acquisition model, but we also show brand advertising in the same inventory. And this is an example of how this kind of brand advertising can be itself in AR. Another one of these is the YouTube makeup try-on stuff. So again, we're going where the audience is in this case. They're on YouTube. They're actually watching a makeup video already with an expert showing them how to put on makeup. And then they're invited by Sephora or MAC or one of the big makeup brands to try one of the new lines of makeup on the spot, right there within YouTube. The point being, the consumer didn't have to make a conscious decision to go download an app to then be marketed to. They maybe weren't sure about that, that's something they wanted to do. But when you can have serendipitous discovery in the form of advertising content that is relevant to someone, that opens up a whole new set of possibilities. Finally, this image on the left is advertising content done as search. This is an example of something Google showed last year at their I/O conference back in 2019, which was all about, at the beginning of the scenario was, I was searching for a sneaker. I got a model of a New Balance sneaker. It was 3D. I got to spin it around and play with it. And at the end of that experience, I tapped a button that let me try it in AR. In this case, I'm not trying it on my actual leg. We're still a little bit bleeding edge on the technology to let you do that and put it on your foot. I want to see what it looks like next to the rest of my wardrobe. So it's sort of similar to the Warby Parker try-on, but again, it's not on your body. It is, how does this thing look with my clothes? But that was seamless. It was a discovery mechanism that had happened through search that, this was a demo, but obviously I think you get the idea that in theory, this would be a paid placement that led you to this place where you can see this content. So all by way of saying there's a whole other end to this, which is customer discovery that also can be enabled with immersive technology.
Right. Yeah. To add to that, yeah, it's all great. Actually, the shoe try on though, right? There are apps out there that do really, really well at foot recognition and allow you to try on your shoes. Like WannaKicks is actually a fun mobile AR app, right?
Yeah, I want to be clear about that. What I meant is in the context of simple advertising content like this. If you want to go deeper and you want to try and compare shoes or, some of the things you'll talk about later, Neil, I like that pair of shoes. Can you show me something that looks like that and put it on me? You're right. There are some apps that do a good job of body tracking enough to and shoe recognition enough to replace the thing on your foot and not look stupid and actually, track the movement of your legs. But they're typically not shown in ad content yet. It's too complex. It's very complex. It's a lot of machine vision. There's, it'd be a very big advertising unit.
Right.
Too much content to deliver down the wire.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's useful, I think, right, to make the distinction between what is now technically possible and what is actually working on mobile devices generally, like in a native app context, right, versus what makes sense in an ad context, right? So hopefully that distinction makes sense to everybody. But the discovery aspect, as you were saying, Tony, in an ad context is really, really critical. So, yeah, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, this is just one more use case that we didn't cover in detail, but I think probably people are familiar with IKEA Place. These are images from that. So this is a specific app you get from IKEA. It has many, many of their products in their catalog. and it lets you try them in your home setting first. Interestingly, you were talking about the lost opportunity in the store with Obsess.
Right.
Like maybe Obsess could solve for that. I'm in the store, I'm in the showroom. This is sort of the flip side of that idea. I bring the showroom into my house. I'm not looking at a virtual showroom. I get one product at a time in my house. And then with that app, I build a shopping list that I then use to go into the IKEA store. You don't transact from it with an IKEA place. You put together your wish list basically, and then they bring you into the store, to do what they do to you when you go in an IKEA store, which is trap you for an hour and a half and you can't escape. It's the whole thing. So they just complemented the IKEA experience fundamentally. But it was sort of the flip side of that Obsess use case that you brought up. But it's pretty great. I mean, technically wise, there's still some limitations here. The tracking, the newest iPads have great environment recognition, by the way. The newest iPad Pros have like next up level of what we'd call SLAM recognition and all that. The earlier incarnations of an app like IKEA Place would force you often to rescale the object once you've dropped it in, because it had no idea really what the boundaries of the space are. The best it could do is find the floor for you. The rest was up to you. So the experience hasn't been like 100% seamless to date, but that's only just going to get better. And to hear the head of 3D at IKEA, Dan Frith, tell it, who I've spoken to in the past a few times, this has been wildly successful at that realm of getting people to try these things out and then come into the store with the intent to check them out for real.
Yep. And again, I mean, we talked about this with the Shopify stroller example, right? But I mean, anything that is a physical object, especially something of significant size that you're trying to see, how does this fit into the spaces, the areas of my life, places I live my life. Mobile AR is pretty well, I don't know, as you're saying, Tony, not 100% nailed it, but it's nailed it enough, right, for it to actually be valuable, right, in terms of a consideration process. So all of this that we've talked about so far, I think is mobile augmented reality, right, either in an advertising context or in a native app context. We wanted to take a minute just to acknowledge something rather different. And also all of those use cases have been kind of on the consumer side, on the customer side. Digital 3D technology, VR, AR, XR, whatever you want to call it, is also super, super valuable. There are many use cases that we're not going to go into today. We have some coverage on our near future retail publication if you want to check it out, but we're also in upcoming NFR Live events, we're going to go deeper into these. But we wanted to just acknowledge that there are these use cases. One realm of use case that is 100%, and actually has been for at least a year, ready for prime time now is using virtual reality to train workers, right? And whether that's what's often called soft skills, which is like, diversity and inclusion training, or, how to get along better with people, how to interact and have a sense of like your audience and interacting with them. Or in fact, learning how to functionally perform certain tasks in a work context, right? So again, that logo wall includes companies like Walmart that are using virtual reality to train their workers in general, like it's a mainstream thing for them to do. Many other companies are doing this. So the reality is it's also super timely right now, right? If you have a business that you need to train anybody, like more than a few dozen or certainly a few hundred people, definitely you owe it to yourself to look into this. And there are articles on Near Future Retail again that talk about training workers using virtual reality. Reach out to us if you're interested in that. But we know that part of this whole new era, this coronavirus, the societal and economic shifts involve a lot of layoffs and also a lot of retraining. Anyway, enough said about this, right? I think that's you got why this is valuable and why we want to talk about it right now. Anything to add to that, Tony?
No, all by way of, let's go to the next slide. I mean, we just scratched the surface on the use cases on the sort of B2B side of this, right? But more importantly, and I'll let Neil speak to this primarily now, the way we look at this, and I think the way a lot of the folks in industry who are involved on the day-to-day are looking at this, is that real-time 3D and XR technologies are going to be instrumental in the entire product lifecycle, from design conception to manufacturing to production, logistics and delivery, all the way to consumer discovery, the entire life cycle, and enabled by digital twins of the physical items.
Right. And yeah, so which is kind of explains why, again, or another dimension of why that logo wall represents companies and brands from across verticals, you know, everyone recognizes the value of being able to have digital twins, you know, 3D models that can be made to be photorealistic. In fact, I know, Tony, you haven't mentioned yet, but you often talk about the fact that, like, do you want to mention your IKEA example?
Yeah, sure,
there?
absolutely. And it's going to lead into what we talk about next on content creation, but it's a good time to talk about it. Folks in the audience might not know, and we were almost going to spring a quiz question on you guys, but we didn't want to bother with doing polls, you know, for quiz questions. So I'll give the answer away. You may not know that nearly 100% of IKEA's 2D image catalog, print and online, is virtual. That is, the physical item you're seeing an image of was not photographed to create the catalog image. It was not scanned in any way to create the catalog image. That image was created from CAD models. They have what they call both soft and hard CAD, soft CAD being for the fabrics, you know, fabrics on couches, for example, pillows. Hard CAD being for their bureaus and their kitchen cabinetry. And so when you look at some lines of their product catalog, I believe kitchen is one where every individual item, not the showrooms, but every individual item in the kitchen catalog is generated completely from a CAD model and a render. It was never photographed. It was never produced first to go in that catalog, which is great and alleviates a huge set of problems on the content creation side that we should get into. Let's flip to the next slide, Neil. Yeah, so just to make it clear here, virtual technology can be also used to just create amazing imagery. This was, believe it or not, this is a purely virtual rendering. This one I would have not known was not a photograph. Maybe there's other graphically inclined folks that are attending right now that would see something there that says, oh yeah, I can tell, but I can't tell, and I'm pretty good at graphics. This was created from technology by a company called ColorMass in Germany. And literally everything is from either a CAD model or some photographs that are then turned into some background imagery in the room. But everything is a render, you know, the room, not just the items. So that's kind of amazing. Between that and the kind of things we're seeing with IKEA, I think that's just the beginning. But what we really want to talk about and dwell for a minute on this slide, and this is something we've done extensive coverage on NFR blog about, is that this is probably where most of the action has to happen in the next few years in terms of this industry getting together and solving hard problems. Creating 3D content is not as easy as creating 2D content still. We believe that it's equally, if not more cost effective when you realize all the benefits of making the investment in the 3D creation in terms of model reuse and reconfigurability by consumers and the interaction that it enables. But it is inherently a little more labor intensive to do that. And it isn't just like you can today really reliably point a phone at an object and get a 3D model from it. So it's not something that everybody can do today. And in fact, there are various techniques for creating content. We explore a lot of them on the blog in multiple articles. I mean, everything from Mechanical Turk, outsourcing by companies like CG Trader, who go out to their network of thousands of CG creators and get cheap bids to do cheap models, to fancy tech that will take like 2 or 3, you know, photogrammetry tech, they'll take 2 or 3 images from your phone and with some machine learning assist, turn it into a 2D object, 3D object rather, and a lot of other things in between. Neil, you want to add some commentary here around some of the other creation techniques that we've been seeing? I mean, it's pretty rad what's going on out there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, 2 things are coming to mind right now. One is that there are mobile apps, you know, for iOS and Android that, you know, if you're curious, like, what is it like to kind of reverse engineer or capture some kind of digital twin or like a rough approximation of a 3D object in your environment, there are apps that do that. And we covered that a little bit on the blog, and we're happy to provide those kind of pointers afterwards. The other thing is that, and as Tony said, there's as much information as you want about this, because about creating virtual product catalog content. There's an article called Virtual Product Catalog, which is probably a good way in on near future retail. But this is really, as Tony said, you know, the next few years is going to be, in order to make all the use cases that we're talking about really rich and valuable to people, the content creation of digital twins and 3D objects is going to be critical. So it's important, I think, without dwelling on this too much or belaboring it, to note that Shopify is not just investing in the sort of consumer augmented reality browsing kind of functionality that we saw earlier in our talk, with the strollers and being able to make that shoppable in AR, but also making the content creation, the digital twins of your strollers or whatever your physical products are, super easy and turnkey, right? So I don't know if any of you are Shopify merchants, but if you go on their kind of merchant admin UI, you can very straightforwardly and with very little effort on your part, upload a set of photographs of your products, each one in your product catalog, and then Shopify will actually wrap very simply in a turnkey way the production of 3D models of those products that you can then quickly bundle into a mobile AR shopping experience for your customers. So in some ways, it's still challenging, as Tony said, but I feel like the servicification of all of it is moving really, really rapidly, and it's important. I mean, Shopify, honestly, have been on such a tear recently, both as a business, a public company, and also just as a community, right? And it's really giving Amazon a run for its money, and it's kind of exciting as someone who, as much as I admire Amazon and appreciate what they're doing, I don't want them to be the only company, right, that's investing in groundbreaking e-commerce. And I feel like Shopify is really leading in certain ways, certainly when it comes to immersive technology on mobile.
Yeah, and there are also a crop of startups that have emerged to fill some gaps as well on scaling up the content creation. My friends in LA, Ventana, who have some machine learning assist that's been really good for creating full catalogs of jewelry and shoes and other types of items. Folks at 3XR, which is some folks who spun out of Wayfair, the Wayfair Next team. There's a lot going on out there in the startup world, and just assuming from our audiences, the networks that we blasted to for this event, that there are entrepreneurial types in this crowd right now, maybe thinking about how they can either supply technology solutions or service offerings that could help here. And so there is, I think, a lot of opportunity on this part of the ecosystem for folks to get in there and supply solutions. And I'd say, I'm speaking for Neil and me on this, we see massive opportunity in that area.
Right, absolutely.
So let's go. So let's talk about the near future.
Let's do it. So yeah, I mean, we're just calling this. So at Reading Futures anyway, and I think in the context of near future of retail, we've always, said, and Tony and I have said to each other, like, what do we mean by near future? When someone asks, it's like, well, the next 3 to 5 years, right? Because that's about as far as it makes sense to prognosticate or to predict, not even predict, but just to imagine, right? What's coming. Things are changing so rapidly. But now, thanks to COVID, right? I mean, 3 to 5 months, maybe, if you can bear with us. I mean, that feels like, the near future, we'll call it. I mean, we can kind of see some specific actions and opportunities that are really particular to the coming 3 to 5 months. And this is really just to reflect, these points on this slide, what we've already been sharing in this talk, which we're going to wrap up in a minute and move to your conversation. But the opportunity to start creating 3D models, digital twins from physical products, right? If that's part of your domain of professional operation at all, we've covered that. To tell your brand story in 3D using augmented reality ads, as Tony's talked about in detail, as Unity supports and many other companies do. Also kind of 3D AR experiences, even outside of ads, right? Whether it's in-game or other contexts. Creating VR simulations for training, both kind of worker functional activity training, diversity and inclusion, soft skills, et cetera. And then the last point here is really just that, and this is kind of a transition, and again, a kind of framing that we want to invite all of you into, and we're using in our upcoming series of articles on NFR, that social or physical distancing creates a set of constraints that designers would say, design always happens within constraints, no matter what the context is, right? So we'll just look at these constraints that we're currently operating under, whether it's things have to be touchless or we need to be 6 feet apart from each other, et cetera, like what are the opportunities lurking there? It was interesting, someone the other day said to me, well, like if I play catch with my son or my daughter, a ball, like we have to be at least 6 feet apart. So that was just like a light bulb went off over my head. I was like, wow, like there are certain things that where you actually, they don't work unless you're 6 feet apart, like beyond playing catch with a ball, like what else? What else can we come up with, right? So this is a good, I think, springboard into what's coming next. So now, of course, we enjoy doing a little bit of further feature casting, right? So we're going to take a couple minutes to do this, and I think we're right on time, Tony. Like to have 20 minutes.
Yeah, this is great. We'll have like inside 20 minutes to have some Q&A.
What's the
Get
Q&A
your
looking
questions.
like? Yeah.
Nobody yet. Oh, here we go. Trevor's popping in. Yeah. So I was going to say, get primed. We're going to have some Q&A streaming in. I'll man the Q&A, Neil. And we can get some early ones coming in because you're going to take the next couple of slides and go crazy. I will say one thing, which is that this is my favorite part because no one's going to call me on any of my crap 5 years from now. So I get to say whatever I want. I love being a futurist from that point of view. I mean, I still try. I don't make stuff up. I still try to, but no one holds you to this stuff. So it's a fabulous space to work in, right?
I'll hold you to it.
Oh, you will? Okay. All right. You heard it here first, people.
Why?
Yeah. So go for it, Neil.
All
right. Why don't you start us off?
But yeah, let's do it. So this is current, right? So many of you have probably seen this. It feels a little bit early days, right? But this is Instagram actually. So brands can present products that have tags. I think Instagram calls them tags, that say, you can call out these hotspots in their content, say, that allow you to tap through, see the price of something. So it's purchasable social content, right? But imagine if each of these objects was actually a digital twin of the product that is actually being represented, right? Could you extract that as a distinct thing, reshare it, be able to transact on that, just like we can do with images today? And so we feel like this is just a pointer to what's coming once all of these objects are actually kind of modeled and shareable as discrete digital twins, 3D objects, right? And Tony, do you have something to add to this? I think you wanted to say something about this.
Yeah, well, I mean, just
there's the ability to, again, we mentioned this earlier, but just when we can capture, just like we can capture now, of course, images, modify them, share them, do the same thing with video, right? We're like 10 years into being able to do that on our personal devices. All of that is going to happen over the coming years with 3D objects as well, 3D digital twins. And so it's going to be super powerful in this context.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing to just note here is that when we talk about augmented reality in particular, we often emphasize the rendering, the animation, the production side, the 3D graphics side of AR. I know I do because that's my expertise. But we tend to gloss over the equally important part, which is computer vision. And so computer vision is what powers you tracking all that environment tracking I was talking about, the camera being smart enough to recognize what's going on in the world, whether it's the layout of a space, individual objects, faces, and so on, facial features for animating using emojis, et cetera, and emojis. And that's an equal part of what is important about augmented reality. And so just even with this example, if I could just point my camera at anything and understand what it was, that would make it that much easier to share rather than having to type another keyword or click on a link.
Right.
Maybe it's just like I see it and then I can take an action from it right there.
Fantastic segue, Tony. This is a visual that we use to, these days, it's just like, oh my God, like being out in the city on a mild day like this, as urban dwellers, I think Tony and I are just longing for this now. But when we're back in the world, anytime we're in the world, the idea is that, as Tony was saying, the ability to just see a product, and today it's like, oh, this backpack or these shoes or this top or whatever it is that you see out in the world that is transactable, purchasable. This happens all the time. We want it, we like it, we don't necessarily know how to get it. We're not going to say, hey, excuse me, or it's rare that we feel like, hey, where did you get your shoes? But the idea is that all of this technology is coming together to make it possible to, as Ariana Grande sings, just be able to say, I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it, right? Have that be a narration of kind of a customer journey, right? In the near future. We see this happening. 3 to 5 years might be pushing it, but certainly in this decade, we're going to have that be the new norm because of machine learning enabled recognition. I think actually smartphones are going to be able to do that, on the fly, recognize certain kinds of objects in the next few years, just point them. Obviously, Amazon and others are highly, highly motivated to make that work, right? Because it's another opportunity to convert desire to purchase, right? So and we cover this. There's an article called "Making the Whole World Shareable and Shoppable" on NFR as well, which gets into this in detail. So then obviously for a little further out, but maybe not so far on the left, this is an artist's imagination you may have seen before of Apple glasses. I think we still think, although there are early examples of augmented reality glasses, you still think Apple is going to do something very interesting in the realm of glasses in the next year or two. It may not be augmented reality, properly speaking, to start with. It may just, maybe some of you have seen this example last week. It was in the press. I think I posted it to LinkedIn. It just said, maybe the stance that they have is because life should pop, right? Allow life to be more visually interesting. So we think that's going to happen. On the right, this is Mojo Vision's contact lenses, which actually just raised tens of millions of dollars, I think. I forget exactly the number. We were talking about this before, Tony, but like, they are an independent company, but they're really well funded, and they're making contact lenses that actually do similar kinds of things. This is actually their visual, but if we're wondering like why do we care about AR glasses? If there's anyone out there who's wondering that, it's this kind of use case, right? Being able to move around in the world, not have to bring out your phone, to have contextually relevant content. Like this guy is out in the city, he's like wondering, where should I eat, right? And it's not just, you can eat here, here's some metadata information about it, but here's the navigation directions, sort of turn by turn, right? So that's just one of many, many, many examples that will eventually AR glasses will fulfill on, right? So we could talk about that for a long time, but I want to be mindful of our time for Q&A.
Yeah, so I think we should do it, right? Are we ready to move to Q&A, Neil?
Let's do it. And we can actually stop sharing so that we can have this feel a little bit more intimate, maybe, yeah?
Let's leave that flashed up for enough of a minute so everyone gets our Twitter handles, our websites, hit us up on all the things, look us up on LinkedIn.
We can leave this here. Let's just jump into Q&A.
Great, all right. I actually had one coming in over the chat from Natalie Porto, so we'll start here. That's actually in the chat window, so you can probably see that one, Neil.
Great.
Yeah, so did a great job of citing samples that are wearable or furniture that you can fit virtually. Thank you, we try. But what about items beyond the ones you need to see? What about products you need to hear to demo them, like consumer electronics? Yeah, great question. Or products you need to smell. Until retail comes back when you can demo with all senses. Any thoughts on how products beyond wearables can react?
Smell-o-vision.
Neil, I'm gonna let you take, smell-o-vision. I'm gonna let you take this one to start, Neil.
I don't know, I mean, I don't have massive followers on Instagram, but like over the years, I've said so many times because I'm posting videos. It's like, so I love mushrooms. I love cooking with mushrooms and foraging for them. But like so often the aroma is the salient aspect of the experience. And I'm even recently posted like simmering morels on that. And I'm like, I want Smellstagram, it should be called Smellstagram, right?
That's a terrible name. Don't quit your day job.
It's a terrible name? Oh, come on. Well, all right, yeah. So I'm not a brand
Insta-smell.
expert. I'm not a branding namer, right? Insta-smell?
No.
It's all bad. Aromagram.
Yeah, I mean,
what about it?
I mean,
yeah, how do you do that? So all I can say about this is that it's really early stages. I mean, there are just about anything that people can imagine, there are people who are pursuing it, right? And so there is technology that does allow for capture and reproduction of aromas. It's not anything that works in a reliable way on, say, a mobile device. I have seen, I don't remember the name of it now, a product that actually plugs into an iPhone that can then produce a limited range of aromas that are digitally driven by the functionality of the app that uses that kind of as a peripheral, but very, very early stages. So I mean, for now, until retail comes back, yeah, how products beyond wearables can react. I mean, so with smell, yeah, I mean, it's still very early days. Hearing. So it's not, when we say digital twin, I mean, to be fair, you're right. I mean, we're very focused on the visual. There's a lot of really interesting work happening in kind of at the intersection of augmented reality and audio experience. In fact, I might even say we've been a little bit negligent in this conversation, not talking about audio as a dimension of augmented reality. I think it really is. And there are certain friends of ours in the broadly AR community, including Jessica Brillhart, who runs VR AI, that are, and many others that are pushing forward on, kind of the next phase beyond spatialized audio, which we've had for quite a while, surround sound, but AR for audio, which can actually give you a sense of being in a space and with other people, with other sound sources, and it becomes not just like surround sound, which is designed for a seated stationary consumption experience like a home theater, but you can move around in the space and actually have the spatialized audio, the augmented reality audio respond appropriately to where you are relative to the sound sources and within the space that it's designed for. So
yeah, and Bose has been leading the charge
yeah.
there. They released the frames like a couple of years ago, which is this form factor. These aren't those, but they're roughly like this, but they're sunglasses, and they have speakers on each side, and you can hear spatialized audio through them. And they've used that same family of technology now in all their new over-the-ear noise canceling headphones and some other experimental kind of bone induction type of audio tech they've been working on. So there's a rich world there. But to back out of audio and get back to smell and all that, it's just got me thinking, depending on how deep and lasting these changes are because of COVID and how long this goes on for, that's going to dictate how much more of a drive there is into gadgetry that goes into the home across a variety of areas, right? If we're going to be traveling less for 2 more years versus 6 more months,
right.
That is going to make a difference on how much people are going to buy things that come into the home that could reproduce pieces of a sensorium. And in some really weird future, I can imagine there being something, where you can get a lot more of these senses involved. You'll need more equipment though than just the latest mobile phone, or the phone will get really freaky. It'll have smell producing things on it or whatever. Yes, you'll be pouring chemicals in your phone. Doubt that's going to happen. There'll be peripherals or something. But anyway,
yeah.
Well, there's also,
and there's haptics, which we're familiar with in a limited way on our mobile devices. And also, like if you've used Oculus Quest, VR controllers has limited haptics. And I think there's going to be a lot of advancement in that space in the coming few years as well. I think we're still in very early days of feeling like what's the value of it. So
we get a lot of questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to read it to you. So from Trevor Flowers, have you seen anyone working on using XR to create rich product review videos? For example, the producer could record a physical unboxing and then register augmented video that decorates the main features of the product. What a great idea. I haven't seen anything like that. Neil?
I don't think I have. But yeah, agreed, it's a great idea. Let's make it. Reach out.
Yeah. Trevor, let's talk. I don't know, someone make it. Trevor, go build it.
Love it. What's next?
Matthew, we answered yours already. Spatial audio playing into this. At least we touched on it. It's literally what his question was.
Okay.
All right. Christopher Edwards. If you know the history of shopping, the idea of open shelves and open racks is very new. Dresses were modeled. Food was handed to you by the grocer. With physical distancing, we might be moving back to that approach. How do you believe, beyond the technology, the experience of shopping, the relationship between customer and shopkeeper sales associate will change in the near future? Neil.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And hey, Chris, great that you're able to join. So I've already seen this, and again, I'm blanking on the name right now, but some major, it may have been boutique sort of fashion retailers, but moving into the space of virtual personalized shopping, right? So, on the high end, certainly in the luxury context, having a personal shopper has been a thing for a long time, right? It's just been something that you do in person. You show up, you have a private space, they bring stuff they think you're gonna like based on the relationship you've developed, sort of like a financial advisor, but a fashion advisor, right? It's based on knowledge and personalization. That can be done, it is being done over Zoom, right? To sort of like basic audio visual interaction. Of course, you don't actually physically have the products there, but you can have someone walk you through and curate spatially, visually. You can imagine if this room was merchandised and I moved the camera around, I could show you, in an intimate enough way, these new products, this new apparel, et cetera, that I have that you're interested in. And so that relationship can happen. Just similar to relationships and interactions in all other realms of our lives that we're conducting over video now, right? So, I mean, I think that's happening, and it's going to continue to happen. And clearly, you know, although a lot of the technology we've shown here is early days, I mean, you can imagine this happening. You know, I'm thinking in some of the social VR platforms like Spatial, we haven't talked about here at all yet, but I mean, I can imagine Spatial being used to meet, you know, to conduct that kind of meeting, right? Where, long story short, I mean, Spatial, check it out, spatial.io, but I mean, they capture and render quite realistic facial imagery, you know, so that you can be in 3 dimensions in a virtual space with other people, and their faces look roughly like they do in real life, and you can move around and bring content in from outside of that virtual space. So there's a lot. I mean, again, it's pretty early days, but that's an amazing example. There are various other kinds of platforms that are pursuing this sort of thing too. So I'm imagining that kind of use case you're talking about, Chris, could be supported in that kind of platform.
Neil, let's put a pin in this, Chris. Thank you. This is an awesome question.
Yep.
It actually suggests 2 future topics, by the way. The first is the thing Neil just touched on with avatars. We didn't talk about avatars and social virtual worlds in this context at all of retail. In fact, I believe that's Neil, I think I'm seeing you alt tab around. Just FYI. I think that's you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that one, which is a big topic,
Yep.
and we didn't want to touch on it because it's rife with all kinds of issues at the moment. It is very early, but I do want to get back to that one. And Neil and I are both spending a little time taking a fresh look at avatars and social environments in general, not just around retail, because of the sheltering we're doing right now. So let's note that as a topic, Neil. The other one is, and we didn't make this clear to our audience necessarily at the top of the segment, NFR, our publication and our focus is not just about immersive technology. That's what this talk is about. We're going to be spending quite a bit of time looking through that lens and during the new era with COVID looming over us. But Neil brought something up. A personal shopper could be doing that with you on Zoom. There's a whole other set of topics around what remote shopping is like with any of these technologies, not to do with immersive tech necessarily at all, but some of the things we're doing now, like with Zoom, with chat, with AI. There's a whole realm to be looking at here. So these are future topics we should explore, Neil. I want to keep going on the Q&A because we have 6 minutes left.
Great.
Manny, hard crash. Okay, I'm sorry that Zoom did that to you. If this question hasn't been asked, then I think it's kind of connected to the previous one, Neil. What do you think about Hatsune Miku, Lil Miquela, and Fortnite Travis Scott? Love the digital pop star idea, and also how can they promote how they can promote brands anywhere, anytime. So from one little narrow perspective, the idea of a personal shopper, they could be actually a virtual celebrity and not a real person. People like Little Miquela, virtual people, are already influencing purchasing that way, would be one immediate answer. Neil, did you want to add to that?
Yep. Well, yeah, I mean, so the whole world of virtual influencers and their intersection with retail broadly, right, which we like to define as like everything that has anything to do with things that are bought and sold, right? The whole supply chain all the way through to all kinds of consumer use cases. Virtual influencers are definitely an emerging like big topic that we've got in the pipeline for coverage on Your Future of Retail too.
As far as Fortnite Travis Scott goes, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here, Manny, in the sense that people are spending more and more time in game. That's where the audience is. That's why we're seeing concerts happen inside a socially connected game. That's why Unity's advertising business is actually on the increase right now, because everyone is home doing these kind of entertainment activities. So outside of the virtual celebrity part, the virtual venue is incredibly powerful. And I think we're just seeing Fortnite has clearly opened up a floodgate of this kind of interest around this. I think we're going to see more and more action happening in games that have large scale, that have a bunch of people in them at once. Neil?
Agreed. I think we should just move on, but I would just say, And so, I mean, Fortnite, Travis Scott, what do you call it? Major Lazer, various other kinds of DJ. I mean, Fortnite obviously has its own economy and its own kind of in-game sales that they're pushing, but it'd be interesting if they also added the opportunity for third parties or so like their guest DJs or whatever to do their own merchandise sales and all of that. I mean, I don't know if that's coming, but yeah, super interesting. See if we can
Next
get another
one,
question or two.
Taylor. Yeah, we can get a couple more. We have 3 more here. I think we can do them. Taylor Shetchet. Hi, Taylor. How you doing? How do you see the future of retail AR marketing tying into near future persistent geospatial data layers like Niantic's Real World, Facebook's Live Maps? This is sort of an AR cloud related question. So Duran Karki, you're asking about AR cloud. We'll try to answer these together. I'll start.
Yep.
Well, okay. So all taking a bit of a near-term hit now because we're all sheltering. But once we get back out in the real world in more pervasive ways, I've been thinking for a while now that, you know, I live in San Francisco, just walking down Market Street and, you know, seeing something that triggers my interest as I'm walking by a potential retail location and opening up geospatial layers right there. There could be data right there related to nearby stores, you know, and that's very much a Niantic play. It's not Pokemon Go. It is like buy the watch inside here. There's an offer happening right now. It's almost like Pokemon Go meets Foursquare meets retail, right? So I see a lot of possibility there. Or Neil like drop me something that I find it on the street later, but it's somehow a, you know, potential buying opportunity. I think there's a lot to be had here when you connect
sort
the
of like
geospatial data layers of AR cloud to, right?
Yeah, just sort of like geocaching for shopping or something. I don't know. And there's been various plays on that over the last few years as well, right? Like leaving AR messages or objects, right, for people in the real world. Super interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's all just yes to that question. You know, I think there's
I think it'll come in
things,
waves, right? It'll come in waves because we're not out there doing it now because we're not on the street, but that's going to drive a lot more immersive content interest into the home. And then when we get back out, I think some of those patterns will be established and brought out into the physical world as well.
There's certain benefits, right? I mean, at least opportunities, right? As painful as this stay-at-home era is, I think, you know, it's lasting long enough that it's going to motivate so many of us, you know, from the huge tech companies down to all of us as individuals, right? To figure out like what can we do within these constraints. So, any other questions?
Yeah, there's one follow-up from Manny. What do we think about hyperrealism versus non-photoreal? Are we headed toward photoreal all the time?
You know, it's an interesting question. I think on the one hand, I think few thoughts. I mean, one thought is, are all films, like is all cinema, is all video entertainment photoreal? I mean,
clearly it's not.
When possible, I mean, it's not, right? I mean, there are reasons and there are values. There's value in super accurate 3D rendering and CGI, and then there's value in sort of like rough, earthy, you know, kind of rough feeling content. And we're at time now, but I feel like, I don't know that we're going to be at photoreal all the time. You know, even eventually, if we create the matrix.
Yeah, I mean, if the technical limitations all go away, right? When we have, you know, 5G and and, you know,
so far we've been limited
rendering
by technology, right? But I feel like, I mean, you and I, Tony, go back to the point where it's like we would long for the ability to just render things in high fidelity all the time, right? But I think, yeah, I think it's going to be a great range. So we're at time. Thanks to everyone for showing up. Really grateful for this is our first NFR Live. We'll keep you posted on what's coming soon. Meantime, feel free to reach out to us, and there should be a really brief survey. If you'd be willing to take 60 seconds or even 30 seconds, probably all it would take, and just let us know what you think of this. That would be hugely valuable for us. So once again, thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
See you soon.
See you next time.